Mom, I can't take it anymore. I'm having my entire salary taken away and am forced to live on $3 a meal per day. I'm so hungry I could die. One day, I was shaken by a call from my son, Felix, who was in tears. Such a near-starvation existence was unthinkable compared to his bachelor days. "What do you mean? Is Isabella sick and unable to cook? Why don't you just come home for now?" Isabella is Felix's wife, the daughter of his employer's president. Her family is naturally wealthy, and I had never heard of them being in financial trouble. Yet, why has he fallen into such a situation? Felix himself doesn't understand the cause, and it has been like this for the past 1 to 2 months. I urged him to leave that house immediately and return home, but Felix stubbornly refuses. But I love Isabella and our daughter, Charlotte, too. Temporarily, I decided to prepare some parcels for Felix and secretly sent him some money. A month passed, and Felix called to say he was coming home with Charlotte. Sensing something was not right, I waited at home that evening, holding my mobile phone tightly, when suddenly the doorbell rang. I leaped from the living room chair and rushed to open the front door. "Felix! Charlotte!" I was fully expecting them to be there, but it was Charlotte standing there, looking surprised. She was wearing the glowing pajamas I had bought her as a birthday present. As I embraced her, I felt her arms were thin, and her body was frail. Felix was nowhere to be seen. As I had been intently looking at Charlotte, I felt a presence behind her, and turned to look. There stood Isabella, with a creepy smile on her face. My name is Chloe, a 58-year-old housewife. I've loved eating since my student days, often having pizza and donuts for snacks, in addition to 3 meals a day. This habit didn't change even as an adult, as eating became a way to relieve stress, leading to me gradually becoming plump. While the women around me dieting for marriage were all slim and beautiful, I sometimes felt depressed, feeling like a balloon. At one party, it seemed clear that the men were avoiding me. However, one slim man came up to me. "Chloe, would you like to go out for a meal with me sometime?" Me? In stark contrast to me, the slim man was named James, who would later become my husband. After dining out together about 3 times, on our 3rd date, we agreed to enter a relationship with marriage in mind. "Chloe, you're cute, especially when you're eating." James would say this every time we went out to eat, and he always positively accepted that I ate more food than him. Since I worked in sales at a department store, it was often difficult to find time to meet with James. Nevertheless, James never showed any signs of annoyance and always arranged his schedule to fit mine. "I always feel bad about it," I murmured, but James shook his head. "It's okay. My company has a flex time system, so I can adjust my hours a little. Don't worry about it." He worked in an IT-related company, which was somewhat rare at the time. Though I didn't understand much about internet advertising creation or software development, his passion and expertise in his field looked very cool to me. Later, James and I got married, and I left my job to become a housewife and have a child. While I sometimes wonder if we should have spent more time just the 2 of us, the baby boy who was born was incredibly adorable. Believing that a child's name is the first gift parents can give, James and I spent a lot of time discussing it. "How about Felix?" Meaning happy. It's a good name, isn't it? I like it. Felix. Let's name him Felix. We hoped he would be happy and make others happy too. Our son Felix grew up healthily and seemed to inherit my love for eating, becoming pleasantly plump. After graduating from college, Felix, like his father, joined an IT company and later transferred to the company where James worked. In that aspect, the two were similar, and at home, their conversations about work made me feel somewhat left out. "Dad, about this project in the new department I've been assigned to. That company can be a bit tricky, so it might be better to explain things to them as politely as possible." Being a housewife for so long, inspired by the working energy of the two, I considered starting a part-time job and began looking through job listings. However, I haven't heard such conversations between them for 5 years now, since Felix got married to a woman named Isabella shortly after changing jobs. She turned out to be the daughter of the president of Felix and James's workplace, leading Felix to become a son-in-law and move out. I can still vividly remember how happy they looked when they came to announce their marriage. Later, they had a daughter named Charlotte, and now they live in their own home, a little distance away from our family home. As they live somewhat far and can't visit often, I feel a bit lonely. However, I was delighted when Charlotte would call me via video on Thanksgiving and Labor Day. Occasionally, I also call Felix. "Hello, Felix? Charlotte's birthday is next month, right? I want to buy her something. Does she want anything?" "Thanks, Mom, but you really don't have to go out of your way." "But we haven't even met properly. She's turning 3, isn't she? How about some clothes?" Clothes? I'm not sure. Maybe she mentioned wanting pajamas with some cartoon characters on them?" His answer was vague, but I jotted it down on a piece of paper. When I was working at the department store, I often had customers looking for girls' pajamas with anime characters, and I would guide them to the section. The thought of now being on the customer side, going to buy it myself, felt oddly strange. Got it. Pajamas with a cartoon character. After the call, I immediately went out and bought them, even getting them gift wrapped for her birthday. However, feeling hesitant about imposing on my son's family, I decided to send it by parcel discreetly. I hope Charlotte likes it. Thinking this, my steps to the post office were a bit lighter, with a message card included. That evening, after James returned home for dinner, I told him about the birthday present I sent Charlotte. "The kids' pajamas these days light up. I hope she likes it." "Yeah, she probably will." "Oh, come on. You could show a little more interest in Felix and his family. He went off to become a son-in-law, didn't he? They're doing fine without us worrying." James responded nonchalantly, poking at his steak with his knife and fork. "There's still one thing that bothers me. It's that James refuses to engage with Isabella and her family. When asked why, they are too wealthy. It's intimidating," he says. "Sure, it's intimidating to deal with the boss of the company you work for, but it's odd to not engage at all. He didn't even show up for the marriage introduction, and to my knowledge, James and Isabella have never met face to face. Even when our granddaughter Charlotte was born, he only looked at her picture and disinterestedly said, 'Huh.' James's consistently indifferent attitude had me somewhat exasperated. Nevertheless, I occasionally called Felix to check in on them. That day, a heavy evening shower had cooled the air, and a refreshing breeze was blowing. As the rain stopped and I felt the hint of autumn in the slightly clearer sky, I called Felix. "Felix, how's it over there?" It's getting cooler in the mornings and evenings, but you're not catching a cold, are you? I'm fine, Mom. Aren't you worrying too much? Not just about you, but Isabella and Charlotte too. Oh, hey, how was the pajamas? Ah, she's actually wearing it right now. She seems to love the light-up pajamas. Hearing this, I felt a bit relieved. I'm glad I chose it. Tell them to come over for a sleepover sometime. All right, got it. I'll hang up now. Oh, wait, Felix, you really doing okay? What? Yeah, I'm full of energy. Good, just checking. Nothing else, then. Good night. Felix said good night and hung up, but I was left slightly worried. His voice over the phone seemed somehow less lively than usual. It might have been just my imagination, but as a mother who had watched over him for nearly half his life, I couldn't shake the feeling that Felix was in distress. Trying to discuss this with James only yielded his usual indifferent response. You think he's weak just from a phone call? You're worrying too much. That may be true, but I do hope it's just my imagination. However, it turned out my intuition was correct when Felix called me one day. It was unusual for him to call during the day, and as I answered, I could hear him sniffling. Felix? Is that you? What's wrong? Are you okay? I feared he might have been in an accident or injured, or something had happened to Isabella or Charlotte. Filled with various thoughts and enveloped in anxiety, Felix cried out, Mom, I can't take it anymore. All my salary is taken, and I'm forced to live on $3 a meal per day. I'm so hungry I feel like I'm going to die. The words, 1 meal a day, shook me deeply. Such a near-starvation existence was unthinkable compared to his bachelor days. What do you mean? Is Isabella sick and can't cook? Why don't you just come home for now? In a weak voice, Felix said, It's not that. Really, Isabella is fine, and Charlotte too. But lately, it's always just salad, bread, and water for me. Even if it were a marital spat, this seemed far too severe. From what I gathered, the cause was unclear, and it had been like this for the past 1 to 2 months. I told him to leave that house immediately and come back home, but Felix stubbornly refused. But I love Isabella, and Charlotte too. Then I'll send you some instant ramen or bread by mail. Thus, I decided to prepare a parcel for Felix and secretly send him some supplies. What a strange situation, I thought. Isabella's family is wealthy, to put it mildly. Their wedding in Hawaii was a lavish affair for 100 guests. Yet, why would they take all of Felix's salary and force him into living on $3 a day? Greedy and clingy, that's what they are, James said dismissively, looking displeased. I decided to ignore his apparent resentment towards the wealthy and finished washing the dishes after dinner. I couldn't understand why he was so averse to discussing Isabella's family. I puffed my cheeks out in a bit of frustration, but James didn't care. Lately, James had been complaining about being busier than usual due to a shortage of staff on a certain project. Thinking he must be tired, I took out the last 2 cups of ice cream from the fridge and handed one to him with a spoon. Let's eat these together. They're the last 2. Oh, nice. What flavor is this? Seeing the ice cream cups, James's eyes lit up. James and I discovered our mutual love for ice cream when we first moved in together. Reminiscing about those times while eating ice cream, we spent the night talking about work, things happening at my part-time job, James's job, and our neighborhood. I continued to occasionally send packages to Felix, hoping for the day he would tell me it was no longer necessary, but there seemed to be no sign of improvement in his situation. A month after Felix's call, the days had become more comfortable, and the small kochia in the garden had turned beautifully, reaching its peak viewing time. I wondered how Felix was doing, and one evening, after spending the day with these thoughts, I received a call. "Hello? Felix? How's everything going lately?" I asked hastily, and Felix, sounding like he was running, answered between breaths. "Mom? Isabella has started limiting Charlotte's meals too. This is no joke. I've reached my limit, so I'm taking Charlotte and coming back home. We're on our way already." "What? You're on your way now? Wait, where are you? I'll come and pick you up." "It's okay. I'll be there soon." The call ended abruptly at that point. I could hear the constant sound of cars in the background, indicating he was near a major road. However, recklessly searching for them didn't seem wise, so I decided to inform James about the situation by calling him. But strangely, my calls didn't connect no matter how many times I tried. That's odd. He should be off work by this time. Maybe he can't answer because he's on the train. I left a text message hoping Felix and Charlotte would safely arrive. An hour passed since Felix's call with no word from James, and neither Felix nor Charlotte had arrived, leaving me overwhelmed with a sense of helplessness, despite all the lights being on in the room. Holding my mobile phone tightly, the doorbell unexpectedly rang. I jumped up from the living room chair and hurried to open the front door. "Felix! Charlotte!" I had fully expected to see them standing there, but it was Charlotte who stood there looking surprised, wearing the glowing pajamas I had bought her for her birthday. "Charlotte, are you alone? Where's Daddy?" Charlotte fidgeted nervously with her hands. Assuming she was nervous because she hadn't visited our house much, I squatted down and hugged her. "I'm sorry you've had it tough. It must have been hard." Only then did I realize how thin Charlotte had become. It was hard to tell in the dim light, and her slender body was hidden under long-sleeved pajamas. Charlotte wrapped her thin arms around my neck and buried her face in. "It's okay. It's okay. Did Daddy come with you?"
"Well, Daddy and I were coming together, but, at the traffic lights, he fell down. And then, an ambulance was called because Mommy came too. Mommy had been following us secretly, so she called the ambulance,"
Charlotte explained as best she could. I was impressed by how well she could speak, but I was surprised by the mention of Mommy. Mommy referred to Isabella, indicating she had come here too. It must have been during that awkward end to the call that he fell. Perhaps having hardly eaten, he had collapsed from exhaustion. I had been intently watching Charlotte, but feeling a presence behind her, I turned to look. There stood Isabella, with a sinister smile on her face, dressed casually in a well-worn top, bottoms, and sneakers, as if she too had hurried over. However, her expression was one of searching, seeking something as she scanned the surroundings and peered into the house through the wide-open entrance door. She then turned her gaze to me and said, "Excuse me, is James not here? I'd like to see him." "What? Why would you want to see James?" I was baffled. Her husband was supposed to be Felix, who I thought was currently being transported in an ambulance. Why had she come to our house without accompanying him? As I stood there confused, James returned home, opened the entrance door, and looked surprised to see her. "What? Isabella, why are you here?" "Wow, James, you're just getting home now? How hard-working." "Don't come here!" James stepped back in a panic as Isabella, with a coquettish voice, moved closer to him. It seemed James knew Isabella. I was filled with even more questions, wondering how James and Isabella knew each other. "What's going on? James, explain." She's... that..." Seeing James struggle for words, which was unlike him, I was convinced there was something more. Then Isabella, with a creepy smile, proudly began to reveal their relationship. "James and I were lovers before I met Felix. But no matter how much I begged him to leave his wife and marry me, he just wouldn't. Right, James?" "That's not true. I don't know you at all." "Don't be shy now. So I thought, if I can't marry James, why not marry his son, Felix? That way, we could still be a family." "I'm such a genius!" Isabella revealed my husband's alleged affair without a hint of remorse, still smiling wickedly. James looked pale, desperately denying it to me. "It's not true, Chloe. Believe me, I have nothing to do with this woman." Before I could say anything, Isabella quickly interjected. "What's not true? We went on dates, traveled together, went to theme parks, and then, when I got pregnant with Felix's child, you started avoiding me like you didn't even want to see me." "I never did that. That's your delusion." "Huh? Is that so? Then all those business trips you said you were on were actually affairs. That's why you said you didn't want to meet Isabella or her parents." "That's not true. It was really for business. Chloe, can't you trust me? Does this crazy woman have any proof?" Asked about proof, I had just been informed of these facts. While it's risky to fully believe Isabella's words, considering James's indifferent attitude towards Isabella's parents, it doesn't seem entirely implausible. The thought that her claims might be true was utterly disturbing. James seemed to have backed off after learning of Isabella's pregnancy, but Isabella herself probably continued to harbor feelings for him. Scary. James, it's terrifying that you're with such a person. Divorce her and be with me. I've always thought only of you." She said this, inching closer to James. "Whoa, stay away. The most important person to me is Chloe." I was speechless at my husband's conveniently timed declaration of loyalty. Divorce seemed inevitable. "And Chloe, you've been meddling too much." "What do you mean?" "You've been sending money to Felix, haven't you? Despite intentionally taking his money and not letting him eat. Because you see, Felix's face resembles James, and I thought if he lost weight, he'd look even more like him." The absurdity of her reasoning, that my son had been driven to his limits for such a petty reason, made my hand shake with anger. Even more astonishing was that Charlotte's dietary restrictions were also because her face resembled Felix's, or rather James, and Isabella wanted to make her lose weight for that reason. "So, I was planning to tell you to stop the unnecessary support." "You're insane!" I was on the verge of lashing out at her when the entrance door opened. It was Felix. He looked somewhat thinner than the last time I saw him a few months ago, which caused a moment of hesitation. but his voice confirmed it was indeed Felix. "Felix, I heard you were taken away by an ambulance. Are you okay?" "I'm fine now. I rushed out to show this to you and Dad," Felix said, pulling an envelope from a bag he was carrying. I took it, looked inside, and found numerous photos of James and Isabella in compromising situations. "What is this?" I was speechless and fell to my knees. The sheer amount of blatant evidence almost brought tears to my eyes. I wanted to believe in James, but it seemed impossible. "Mom, I'm sorry for keeping quiet, but I wanted to believe in Dad. I realized Dad and Isabella were having an affair when we started preconception care. I was happy when the child was conceived, but..." Felix then produced another envelope. I was honestly hesitant to confirm this. I took the envelope and looked inside. It contained the DNA test results for Charlotte. Felix, feeling that the child growing up didn't seem like his own, had the DNA tested without telling Isabella. Seeing the results, I couldn't believe my eyes. The results showed that Charlotte was not Felix's child, but James's and Isabella's. Meaning, Charlotte was not my granddaughter, but Felix's half-sibling. James, looking shocked, asked us, What's happening? Felix, what is that?" "I collected evidence of your affair with Isabella. And not just that. Charlotte is your and Isabella's child, not mine. I can't believe you would go after my wife. I'm disillusioned." "What?" In contrast to James, who was too shocked to speak further, Isabella seemed delighted. "Really? Charlotte is James's child?" she exclaimed joyfully, and ran toward Charlotte, reaching out to hug her. "This child is James's. Come, let's live with James." I quickly brushed her hand away and shielded Charlotte. "Do you even realize what you've done to this child? Not feeding her. What kind of mother are you?" "She's my child. I can do whatever I want with her, right? Give her back to me." "Children are not objects. You should be ashamed." "How annoying. Don't interfere. I'll live happily with James and Charlotte." Isabella grabbed a small cochia pot nearby and swung it towards me and Charlotte. I instinctively hid Charlotte in my arms and closed my eyes tightly as Isabella brought down the pot. "Stop!" Felix, putting his body between Isabella and us to stop her, intervened. "Mom, call the police. Isabella, just stop." "No, let go." While they struggled, I used my mobile phone to call the police. After explaining the situation, a patrol car arrived soon from the nearby station, calming the scene for the moment. The next day, Isabella's scandal reached her biological father. Her parents were shocked and confirmed the story with me and Felix. We told them everything, including Isabella's affair with James and the DNA results for Charlotte. This led James to confront Isabella's father, his boss, who became furious upon meeting and grabbed James by the collar. The unexpected action caused a stir among everyone, but the boss took a deep breath and seemed to finally calm down. It must have been hard for him to stay silent after his daughter Isabella had crossed the line. With furrowed brows and an angry expression, he directly fired him at the meeting. He also disowned Isabella. "I have no need for a daughter who commits adultery," he coldly stated. James faced embarrassment at work and spent about 2 weeks handling his resignation and packing his belongings before going on paid leave. However, what awaited him upon his return was a divorce petition from me. There was no room for discussion after his affair with the married Isabella. James begged tearfully, but I dismissed him, saying, "It's over. I've had enough of you." Felix also presented Isabella with divorce papers, which she readily accepted. Felix decided to take custody of Charlotte and moved back home with me. We sold the old house, which now stands empty. Isabella, thinking she could be with James, ended up being arrested for her relentless pursuit. As for me, I started living with Felix and Charlotte in the place we moved to. We play in the park close to our rented apartment, collecting ginkgo leaves with Charlotte. Felix has transitioned to freelancing, switching to work that can be done from home. Around lunchtime, I receive a text from Felix. "Shall we go out to eat today?" It seems our income has slightly increased compared to when he was employed, allowing us occasionally to go out as a family. I call out to Charlotte and hold her hand as we walk back home. "Let's go out today," I say, and Charlotte smiles, showing her cute little teeth. Healed by that smile, both Felix and I feel happiness in our lives.